Good evening. I think we're going to get started shortly. Good evening, everyone. Hello. Welcome to the Ukrainian Institute of America. I'm Lydia Zeininger. I'm the director here at the Institute. Kathy Nalivaiko, who's the president of our board, could not get back in time, unfortunately, and sends her greetings and best regards and gratitude for all of you being here to address this most important and urgent matter together. So I am Lydia. It's a pleasure to see the broad interest to discuss the topics we're going to dive into later. Thank you for that. For almost 8 decades, the Ukrainian Institute of America has worked to present Ukrainian culture and history and civic life to audiences in New York and beyond. We're proud that this house serves not only as a place for art and literature, but also as a space for meaningful dialogue about issues that matter deeply to Ukraine and to the international community. For more than 12 years of Russia's war on Ukraine, and more than 4 years since the start of the full-scale invasion, Ukrainians have been standing up to defend their homeland, their families, their neighbors, their freedom. In the face of immense suffering and loss, they've continued to demonstrate remarkable courage and dignity as they assert their right to live in peace and determine their own future. As we have done since the beginning of each of our events since the full-scale invasion, I'd like to ask you to stand, if you are able, and join me for a moment of silence to honor those Ukrainians who have sacrificed all in defense of their homeland, their freedom, and right to self-determination. Thank you so much. Tonight, we gather to address one of the most serious crimes associated with war: conflict-related sexual violence. Confronting these atrocities requires not only accountability, but a commitment to placing survivors' voices and experiences at the center of how we respond. We're grateful to the Ukrainian delegation for bringing this conversation forward with such urgency and leadership. And we thank all the international partners, civil society representatives, and colleagues from organizations including UN Women who have partnered with us this evening to help ensure that these crimes are documented, addressed, and never ignored. I'd like to take a moment to recognize the various sponsors and supporters who have made this evening possible. It's not the first time the Ukrainian Institute of America has hosted a CSW event, and we are so proud and honored to do that when we have these meaningful discussions. Also, for the multi-year continuing financial support of the Ukrainian Women's League, the Ukrainian National Women's League of America, and Self-Reliance Financial, the credit union, we are very grateful for their continuing support. Joining those longtime sponsors are new supporters, including the Global Survivors Fund, the Ukrainian American Cultural Center of New Jersey, and the Ukrainian National Federal Credit Union. As in past years, to make these CFW events a great success, the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security is at the heart of our event. They're a wonderful partner, and they join other colleagues from the World Federation of Ukrainian Women's Organizations, Ukrainian Women's Fund, Numo Sisters, Sema Ukraine, and the Dr. Denis Mukwege Foundation, as well as representatives from the government of Ukraine, the Permanent Mission of Ukraine to the UN, and this year we're also joined by the Permanent Mission of the United Kingdom. Deep, sincere thanks to all of those organizations and individuals. Brief moment of pause. It's very warm because the weather has sort of surprised us, so I think we're simultaneously running heat because it's New York City and air conditioning, so we're going to try to modulate and moderate that. But you know, it's good to get all hot and bothered when we're talking about serious topics. Maybe it'll spur us into action even more. I'll take this pause also to ask you to mute devices. We're also filming and videoing here, so probably it's best to wait for those to be distributed instead of filming as we go along here today. So it is now my great honor to introduce the person who will guide tonight's program, Milan Verveer. Ambassador Revere is the Executive Director of the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security, and previously served as the first United States Ambassador at Large for Global Women's Issues. Throughout her distinguished career in diplomacy and public service, she's been a leading global advocate for women's rights, women's leadership, and the protection of women and girls in situations of conflict. She has helped shape international policy on these issues and has worked tirelessly to ensure that women's voices are central to peace, security, and justice. Milan, we're deeply honored to have you with us. Please all join me in welcoming Ambassador Revere to the podium.
Well, thank you so much. I must say it's like a reunion for me tonight, seeing all of our friends from Ukraine especially. So I want to add my welcome to this very important and timely program on the margins of the Commission on the Status of Women. The ongoing full-scale Russian war in Ukraine continues to take a terrible toll, and no one knows that better than some of the people who are going through it here tonight. And that toll on the Ukrainian people continues. And one of the most horrific consequences is conflict-related sexual violence. Hundreds of women, girls, and men in Ukraine have reported sexual violence by the Russian troops over the last 4 years of the full-scale war. And the number is probably far more because this issue is one that people don't want to say happened to them. It's stigmatized in many ways. But many have bravely spoken out just the same. Sexual violence is indeed a weapon of war. It is the same as many of the military weapons in the way it's used to destroy, and it is successful in its intent. The New York Times recently put a spotlight on this issue with a lengthy article. It took 2 pages of the New York Times based on interviews with more than a dozen women who had been sexually abused by Russian soldiers. The stories of what the women endured was gut-wrenching. We at Georgetown recently held events in London with some of the Ukrainian women survivors who are here tonight. They brought their experiences about Russia's brutality to the parliament and to the public there. And they were joined by Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Edinburgh, who has become a powerful advocate of survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, and she traveled to Ukraine to meet with the survivors. As one of the survivors said to me, Putin wants us to be silent, and we will not give him that satisfaction. And I think that's an extraordinary statement about just how much they want the truth to be told. Tonight, we will all learn more about survivor-centered approaches to prevent and respond to this terrible toll. But first, we turn to the Deputy Foreign Minister of Ukraine. Mariana Betsa, in 2024, was appointed to this position and to the Commission of Ukraine for UNESCO. Earlier, she served as Ambassador at Large to the global Ukrainian community in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And prior to that, she held a number of diplomatic positions as ambassadors to Estonia, to the international organizations in Vienna, to the Netherlands, and more. We welcome you always, Minister Betson. It's so wonderful to have you back here. Please.
Thank you, Milan, for these really heartwarming words. And of course, dear Lydia, thank you so much for the invitation and for always creating a very great atmosphere at the Ukrainian Institute. Dear colleagues, it's a great honor for me to again attend the annual session of the Commission of the Status of Women. And indeed, it's not only about gender equality for Ukraine. 1,476 days of Russia's full-scale invasion against my country, 13 years into Russian aggression and 4 years into full-scale war. And Russia's goal hasn't changed: to kill Ukrainians, to destroy Ukrainian nation, to destroy Ukraine as a country, or subjugate Ukraine. Since Russia has no any strategic goals achieved throughout its war, it's opted to fight with the civilians. Every single day it attacks our critical infrastructure, energy infrastructure, residential buildings, schools. It bombs our hospitals, our kindergartens, our children, and it still goes unpunished. And this impunity leads to even further war crimes from the Russian Federation. Aggression, genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes. And they are committed on a daily basis, including sexually related violence and violence in conflict-related violence. Indeed, it is important to remember that every life matters, every voice matters, and of course, it is extremely important to hear the survivors. They're not victims, they're survivors. They're talking about their pain, and they transform their pain into a very powerful voice. But not all of them do speak. That's a pity, because many are still afraid to speak. And our goal as diplomats, but also our goal as just citizens of Ukraine, is to make everyone speak about these horrendous crimes that Russia keeps on committing against civilians, against our prisoners of war, against our children, women, men, boys and girls. And obviously, we need to overcome stigmatization and stereotypes. We need to help our survivors. Ukraine, throughout the war, has indeed tried to provide all possible assistance to our survivors, medical, psychological, financial. We created a very unique mechanism of reparations, and we definitely stand ready to implement our bilateral plan with the UN for the 26-28 years. But this is not enough, because this is only about implementation and institutional capacities. What we need to do more is we need to include Russia into the shame list. Russia as a state, Russian citizens, Russian military and political leadership contribute each single day to the ongoing Russian crimes against Ukrainian people. We definitely need your support in urging the Secretary General, in urging all UN agencies to include Russia to the shame list this year. Last year, Secretary General made a warning that if Russia doesn't comply with international law, if it doesn't reverse its aggressive course, there will be consequences. We definitely need more action, because time for statements, unfortunately, has passed. We need actions, decisive, bold actions, to make Russia pay, because impunity leads to further aggression. Impunity leads to further killings. And Russia knows it very well, because it ran away from responsibility in many other conflicts that it instigated or launched against other people. We're, of course, very much grateful to the UN, to all our partners present here. Of course, we're very much grateful to all the countries and to the USA, first of all, for the providing of tremendous assistance to Ukraine at this extremely important critical juncture. Weapons, sanctions, further assistance, defense assistance to Ukraine, possible future security guarantees, but it is always coming with a delay. We need to do more. We need to do more to make sure that, first, all the responsible are brought to justice, and second, that Russia knows and will be deterred in the future, that it cannot invade neighbors, it cannot violate international law, it cannot violate UN Charter and principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. We need to do more, we as an international community in general. And we need to safeguard that all our survivors are heard, that their voices are heard, and in the future there will be documentation, investigation, and bringing all those perpetrators to justice. I'm grateful on behalf of our government, on my minister, Andriy Sibiga, to every country who supports Ukraine, and to each and every citizen, Ukrainian and ethnic Ukrainians in USA, for their amazing assistance. And of course to UN Women for organizing a very great commission on the status of women's session this year. And as always, well, we don't have any doubts, but grateful to your supporting to women empowerment and gender equality in Ukraine, and to all UN agencies present in Ukraine, because your presence does matter. You do help us a lot in our resilience, in our fight against Russian aggression. Thank you so much. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Deputy Minister, for that overview and for reminding us how much is at stake. It is now my great pleasure to introduce the Deputy Director of UN Women, who've worked so hard and long in so many ways, but certainly to put CSW together. Kirsi Mahdi is in that position. I was in touch with her not too long ago because I wanted to meet with her, and she said, "Oh, I'm on my way to Ukraine." And then night after night, as I looked at LinkedIn, there she was in one meeting after another, one visit after another. She's one of the most devoted, dedicated officials I know, formally with UNICEF, a long career at the United Nations, and she's with us tonight. Please welcome Deputy Director Kirsi Mahdi.
Thank you so much, Milan, for the warm words. Deputy Minister, Ambassador, Excellencies, and all the friends who are in this room. It is such a pleasure for me to join you this evening at the Ukrainian Institute for this very important occasion, from principles to voices. And I would like to join my words in thanking the partners and organizers of this event. But perhaps most importantly, the survivors and activists from SEMA and Numa Sestra, whose courage and leadership guide our collective actions. And as Ambassador Weber was saying, indeed last month I had the opportunity to visit Ukraine. I witnessed both the devastating consequences of the ongoing war and at the same time, the really extraordinary strength and determination of the Ukrainian people, particularly women and the survivors who continue to demand justice, recognition, and dignity. And it is their voices, their experiences, and their determination that remind us why this work matters. Conflict-related sexual violence is among the most brutal forms of violations of human rights. And survivors remind us that an effective response beyond documenting violations must be centered around the voices, agency, and leadership of the survivors in shaping solutions. And this is the spirit behind the compendium of best practices on survivor-centered approaches, which was developed during Ukraine's chairmanship of the International Alliance on Preventing Sexual Violence in Conflict. The compendium shows that survivor-centered approaches are not abstract principles, but practical frameworks which guide prevention, response, justice, and accountability. At UN Women, we are proud to support survivor-centered approaches globally. In Ukraine, we partner closely with government institutions, with sister UN entities, women-led civil society organizations, and survivor networks to strengthen survivor-centered policies and services. This includes supporting legal and policy reform, strengthening the capacities of institutions and first responders, and expanding access to legal assistance and information for the survivors. A critical component of this work is ensuring that survivors have access not only to services, but also to justice and reparations. We have also supported Ukraine in advancing its legal framework on reparations for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. UN Women contributed technical expertise to the development of the laws establishing urgent interim reparations, as well as the registration of persons affected by the armed aggression against Ukraine. Today, we continue our support by drafting the bylaws needed to operationalize this reparations mechanism, ensuring it reflects international standards and remains firmly survivor-centered. We are also honored to serve as an impact partner of the documentary Traces, of which we will see excerpts today. This powerful film, which I had an opportunity to see part of it during my visit in Ukraine, it demonstrates how ethical storytelling can amplify survivors' voices while safeguarding their dignity and agency. And I really want to thank Irina, Ludmila, and Alisa for having put this film together. I hope you will draw inspiration and strength from this film the same way as I did. Because even in the darkest moments, the courage and the leadership of the survivors remind us that the justice and pursuit of justice and dignity will always light the path forward. Thank you.
So the Deputy Director just mentioned the compendium, and we're going to hear more about it now, and I'm going to ask the following discussants to come up. Dr. Katerina Levchenko, who is the Government Commissioner for Gender and Policy of Ukraine. She is also the chair of the Interagency Working Group in Combating Conflict-Related Sexual Violence. Esther Dingeman is the Executive Director of Global Survivor Fund. And Katrin Koppens, the Executive Director of the Dr. Mukwege Foundation. All of you. There was some message went out today.
The first memorandum on cooperation between government of Ukraine, Dr. Mukwege Foundation and Global Survival Fund has been signed several years ago in 2022. So, and since that year, we really had and still have very strong cooperation. And thank you very much for this cooperation to my dear colleagues, Esther and Catherine, and all organizations you represent. And today I have a pleasure to present this best practices compendium which Ukraine prepared as own commitment last year, being the chair of International Alliance on Preventing Sexual Violence in Conflict. This alliance was created as an initiative of United Kingdom, and we worked together with the government of United Kingdom and the two co-chairs of the alliance, governments of Colombia and Japan. And you can find this compendium, not whole book, but this card with QR code, and you can load this information in 5 languages, in English, in Ukrainian, in French, Spanish, and Arabic. And thank you very much to Dr. Mukwege Foundation, who made this possibility reality. And for us, it's very important to bring this information about survivor-centered approach, which we collected from alliance members to different partners, different actors, and to different countries. And we received information from, I know that you have a presentation, you can see presentation. We received information from 23 members of Alliance, from countries, from UN agencies, from civil society organizations, among 34 Alliance members. And for us, it was very important to understand what does survivor-centered approach mean in practice, and why it is such important principle for global response to conflict-related sexual violence. And how to translate this principle into practice. And this publication doesn't aim to offer a single definition of survivor-centered approach. Instead, it documents how different actors, different countries understand survivor-centered approach, survivor-centered thinking and practice, and what works and what challenges remain. With this publication, we aim to achieve two main goals: to identify common practices used by alliance members and to highlight gaps which exist in different regions of the world. And this compendium really designed as a very practical tool for different groups of specialists, for experts, policymakers, government officials, civil society representatives, international organizations, and survivors-led organizations. And you can see on the screen that we received information from all continents, and it really makes this compendium as compendium of global best practice. We structurized this publication around 4 thematic areas: prevention and response to conflict-related sexual violence, in line with the UN Security Council Resolution 2467. This is very important resolution, and we put its sense in the basis of preparing this compendium. We also would like to reflect so-called co-creation process, our cooperation with survivors-led organization, and including survivors of CRSV in policy making, the level of legislation development or development training course for different groups of specialists, or organizing services for those who are in need. And in addition, we included a separate chapter on survivor-centered justice. And it was done in the process of preparation of this compendium, because after receiving the information from different actors, we seen how it's important to have such survivor-centered justice. And several interesting examples, lessons learned. First of all, we understood that preventing conflict-related sexual violence begins with legislation. Legislation is very important in this process, and especially if speak about its implementing at local level. That is why localization of UN resolutions dedicated to conflict-related sexual violence from whole women, peace and security agenda is so important for all countries. The second example, that in response efforts, many contributors emphasize the importance of official recognition of survivor status, legal recognition, and the establishment of clear reparation mechanisms, as well as specialized training for law enforcement agencies and judges. At the same time, we saw that there is important gap like rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is often the weakest part of the support system. And rehabilitation not only for survivors, but also for families, for children, for spouses. And another challenge from all regions is short-term project-based funding, which undermines the sustainability of programs, especially those created by survivors themselves. You can read more about our findings and in different languages, as I already mentioned. And I also would like to encourage you and to share this publication widely. The compendium really is a unique analytical resource with very practical content, and there are very few comparable examples of this kind of work in international practice. And two organizations, Global Survival Fund and Dr. Mukwege Foundation, are members of International Alliance, and I'd like to give floor to my colleagues. Let's start with you. Dear Catherine Kopitz is the director of Dr. Denis Mukwege Foundation.
Thank you so much. Dear Excellencies, colleagues, friends, partners, it's a privilege to speak to you today on a subject very close to the heart of both the Mukwege Foundation and myself, and the survivor-centered approach. And what Katerina Levchenko just mentioned, I think the compendium shows that significant progress has been made, and I think particularly in today's time and age, it's very important we recognize important progress has been made, and it's maybe more crucial than ever that we hold the line together, because we run the risk of losing. And having the compendium with all these very best practices globally, I think shows three clear things. One is the progress is made. The notion of survivor-centered approaches has been accepted globally as a best practice. And it's being translated differently in different contexts based on also what survivors need and what their priorities are in these specific contexts. And I would only encourage for you to read the compendium, as it clearly shows some of the different approaches, but it also highlights that 4 lessons or 4 examples are what we see in almost all contexts. And one is, and I want to share that, and it was already mentioned, the very important fact of having peer-to-peer survivor-led networks. And I would like to re-emphasize that it's very important, based on both experience of others and also us globally, to really start supporting survivors at the very early stages. In Ukraine, this has meant supporting members, survivors that were victims of the aggression starting from 2014. And I think the realization that Semi-Ukraine at that time was supported since 2018, that also has meant that when the full-scale invasion happened, Semi-Ukraine was ready to take that very important role in the early stages of the conflict, to reach out to other survivors, stand up and occupy the space at the table. We saw also there. So it's about giving the space at the table, but you need survivors that are ready and willing to take that seat at the table. So early on, support for survivor networks, and that support to be flexible and sustainable. Long term, it cannot be that survivor networks are created and dropped midway. They're very brave, but also difficult journey. So survivor networks, one. Second, I think the integration of support and partnerships. We heard it this morning when we discussed the framework agreement. I think to achieve and to be able to follow through on what survivors share as their priorities, it's important that different fields work together, both access to healthcare, socioeconomic, justice, prosecutors, legal, law building, so a willingness across different institutions, states, NGOs, survivors, to not only listen, but to be able to act upon their priorities. The other gap which you mentioned, and I think what we see in many contexts, is there is a very strong, solid legal normative framework existing. Human rights law, humanitarian law, what you mentioned, the UN Peace and Security Agenda, but the implementation is lagging behind, almost in all contexts. And also there to give a voice to what survivors find a priority within their own context is an important step to take, followed by a strong commitment from states, from governments to live through on those points. Last but not least, and it's a small bridge again to traces, which was mentioned already, collective memory. I think justice is important. Esther will talk about the key point of reparations. A collective memory projects, and some were part of the compendium. Traces is a very powerful example, but to change the narrative and to make sure if people talk about their conflict, they realize what has happened to survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, and that it becomes part of the national and global narrative is key. To sum up, I think there's great best examples. We have a great normative framework. We have very brave, powerful survivors globally that call for action. And I would call upon all of us, we have the tools, we have the best practices. There's no reason not to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Beautiful spoken. So, dear colleagues and friends, excellencies, Katrina, it's my honor also to share a few words with you on our collaboration since 2022. In April 22, you invited both the Mukwege Foundation and Global Survivors Fund to Kiev to see how we could be of support. And that was the first time that you and I spoke about reparation. And I felt an immediate resonance with you, particularly on the importance of recognizing survivors, acknowledging the harm that has been done, the cruelties that they had survived, and you felt an urge, I think, to give recognition to that. But you were also very realistic, and with you many Ukrainian colleagues, about you cannot only recognize that harm has been done, that needs to be paired up with something very tangible, very concrete, because in reality survivors' lives and had been completely destroyed. So at the time we talked about examples, I think from Kosovo, for example, where survivors were saying we at the beginning of the conflict did not get reparation. If we would have had it, if we had some form of compensation. I spoke to a woman in Kosovo who said, I'm still living in the house where I was raped, but I have put a wooden bar on the door of the room where I was raped. If I had received some form of compensation, I would have moved house at the time. And I think we were talking about that, and you immediately joined us, I think, in the journey that we then embarked with civil society organizations, with survivor networks, with the prosecutor's office, with different ministries. All of us came together, parliamentarians, all of us came together in Geneva for the first time to think about what could reparation look like in Ukraine. It's a few years further now, and what's been achieved is a lot. There's the Bardina law. Some of you will have heard of this. This is a law that provides survivors the right to urgent interim reparation while the war is ongoing. And this is really unprecedented because there's not one country in the world that has developed a reparation program, let alone for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, while the war is ongoing. And I think that is something that is now serving a lot our work in other contexts, like in Syria, for example, some of the lessons learned from Ukraine. But I want to talk about one point in the compendium, and that's the co-creation. So co-creation is a methodology, simply working together with survivors and civil society organizations and the government in creating really programs that work for survivors. So in the reparation program, the eligibility criteria, or how do you identify survivors in a sensible way? How much compensation should survivors receive? Of course, there's no amount enough. So all of these difficult questions, they were solved or they were debated with all of these different constituencies, but survivors in the lead. And that is something that I think very, very successful in the work, which is now making the process actually reparative. So I just want to say that the Barnier has been adopted, has been signed by the President in June last year. But we didn't wait for the adoption. We said, let's try to find the mechanisms to make it work, and that's the pilot project, whereby already 1,080 survivors of conflict-related sexual violence have received financial compensation, also referral to services, of course, and very important, received that formal form of recognition that you mentioned. So they officially heard, yes, you are a victim of war, harm has been done to you that should not have happened, and therefore the government, civil society organizations stand by you to support you. That recognition in our evaluation really comes back. Survivors feel a sense of justice and a strong, strong sense of acknowledgement. One point on that I want to make, because I've heard it several times today, does reparation, domestic reparation, compete somehow with criminal justice? No, not at all. The two are completely complementary. And in fact, many survivors who received compensation, acknowledgement, and the practical measures through the pilot project subsequently were referred to the prosecutor's office on their will because they felt stronger, they felt believed, they felt ready to start that process. Now the time is to hand this over to the government, and the government is taking its responsibility in implementing the law. For that, I think support is needed, and we really call on all actors to support the government financially as well. Reparation is, of course, a total return on investment, but it does need support from the international community. So thank you very much for the collaboration.
Thank you. Esther, thank you, Catherine. Thank you. Well, we're now going to screen excerpts from the forthcoming full-length documentary called Traces, directed by award-winning filmmaker Alyssa Kovalenko. She's also a veteran of the war and a survivor of conflict-related sexual violence when she was imprisoned. Alyssa told me this evening, and I'm just thrilled with this news, that this film was just given the Audience Award at the Berlin Film Festival, one of the biggest festivals in Europe. First time to a Ukraine film. Really wonderful news, and that maybe that will mean a bigger audience all around the world for this story. The film follows 6 courageous Ukrainian survivors of this terrible sexual violence who share their stories and transfer their pain into power. Through them, we learn about the scale of Russia's war crimes and the strength of the Ukrainian women who refuse to be defined solely by the trauma that they have endured. You're now going to see a short advocacy adaptation of the film, and afterwards we'll have the 3 survivors, including Alyssa, on the stage to take your questions. So we'll now see the film.
Алло, доброго дня. Мене звуть Ірина Довгань. Я є представницею такої жіночої організації, називається «Сема Україна». Ми просто така група жінок, які об'єдналися для того, щоб підтримувати одна одну. І я очолюю цю організацію, і я займаюся зараз тим, що я документую свідчення переживших жінок. Я вже для Міжнародного суду Гааги. Я дуже добре розумію, в якому ви стані. Я все це пройшла сама, але життя триває і ніхто вас не кине. І все буде, колись все буде добре. Добре? Все. Давайте, на зв'язку. На зв'язку тоді очікуйте мій дзвіночок, щоб ми домовились, коли я вам привезу допомогу. Все, давайте. До побачення.
Ніч, темна ніч, і раптом я бачу у вікно солдата із автоматом у руці. І тільки я відкрила і зразу одержала удар прикладом автомата в обличчя.
Я вискочила на вулицю, побігла, і вони погнали за мною. Завалили вони мені підножку так. Я упала і почали мене бити. Ногами, носаками, по тілу, по рукам. Соглашайся, сука, по-хорошему, а то сейчас я стрелю.
А потім двері, а потім ці чоловічі голоси. Тоді хтось мені з однієї руки зняв той наручник і наказав роздягатися. Ти вже як то в ловушці ти встала там вже і все.
І мені стріляли біля вуха, от він роздягався. Я обличчям намагалася вдавитися в пол і закритися зверху руками, щоб нічого не бачити і не чути.
Я осталась полностью оголенная, без нижнего белья, без всего. И двумя руками начал меня поднимать кверху и на пол швырять меня. Я поняла, что это будет изнасилование.
Вони погрожували мені тим, що зґвалтують мого сина, що я вбивця, я кончена нацистка, що закінчилася оренда української землі і вони прийшли її забирати. Що такі люди, як ми, взагалі не повинні жити. Вони мені до вказівних пальців наділи металеві такі щипці, а потім, коли вони вже мене вдарили током, то я вже зрозуміла, що воно таке.
Ти думаєш, от хай я зараз закрию очі і більше їх ніколи не відкрию.
Час зупинився і просто от на місці стояв. Виходячи із кухні, він пригрозив мені и сказал: «И только писны, я тебя этим патроном убью».
Тоді ти її. В тебе нічого зробити не можеш. Ні рук, ні ніг, ні обличчя. Ти водієн, ти ніхто.
Прийшли зайві, чорні сили і просто зламали моє життя. Я ніколи з цим не змірюсь, і я ніколи не відпущу цю втрату до кінця. І я по ночам постійно кричала. Я просипалася і кричала. І це були взагалі жахливі часи. Я мусила якось взяти себе в руки, заборонити собі кричати по ночам. І я, мабуть, заборонила.
Тому що мене, я українка, ти скотина така. Ти думаєш, щоб ти мене це поіздівався надо мною? Ти мене довів до того, що я жити не хочу. Та ніфіга, не дождетесь.
І я завжди відчувала, що якщо я залишусь нещасною і зламаною, то вони досягли того, чого хотіли вороги. Вони не вбили мене, але вони мене зламали і зробили нещасливим. І для мене було дуже важливим не дозволити їм зробити мене нещасною. Це моя зброя, з якою я постійно стріляю їм в лоба. І я намагаюся донести це іншим жінкам, що вони це подолали і рухаються вперед, мають якісь цілі, то це найкраща опліуха ворогу, що йому нічого не вдалося з того, що він планував і зробив. І дерева для мене це дуже важливо. Це як символ життя. Почавши життя заново тут, на Київщині, перше, що я почала робити, це саджати дерева. Щось таке із жінками, пережившими насильство. Якщо їх захистити, якщо надати їм гарні умови і догляд, то вони зможуть вкорінитися і поновитися.
Ось такий він має бути мій дім.
Киця. Киця. Коли я почала співпрацювати з цією міжнародною організацією, я не до кінця розуміла, на що воно буде, що воно буде. Але зараз я дуже добре знаю. Це був фундамент, від якого зараз вже побудувалася будинок, побудувався співпраці. І, це дуже добре. Все в цьому світі. Я заграла якусь маленьку свою крапельку, свою роль. І це відновлення. І це, знаєш, це таке, це просто, це в психології має назву посттравматичне зростання, коли людина відштовхується від травми і починає зростати швидше, ніж вона прожила все життя. Галю, ще купа людей не готові. Головне, щоб вони вижили. І ми їх просто чекаємо. Але все зробимо. І зараз маю нарешті можливість карати. І роблю це з задоволенням, осознано, з повним відчуттям, розуміння, що я роблю. З повним відчуттям. Історичний момент. Нова, оновлена QR-кодом з нашими мережами. Нашим фотофон.
Насильство досі не подолано світовою спільнотою саме через те, що всі ці випадки замовчувалися. Замовчувались подробиці жахливі. Замовчувалися відчуття жінок, які це переживали. Що нікому це було не цікаво, і всі вважали, що про це треба мовчати. Саме гласність і те, що жінки перестали ховати всередині себе пережити, це буде таким рухом в суспільстві. Я думаю, що от саме з нас почався тут зараз новий етап. І ми назву організації взяли також, що означає семена на мові суахілі, то це просто не мовчи. Дуже просто і зрозуміло. Не мовчи. Ми не мовчимо. Ви нас чуєте?
Well, I think you'll agree that's extraordinarily powerful. It's the third time I'm seeing it, and it's as though it were the first time. From the pain and the suffering to discover healing and new life. So I'm going to ask our three extraordinary survivors to come forward. Alyssa Kovalenko, I already mentioned, the director. She's the director and survivor, board member of SEMA, one of the organizers. She is joined by Irina Dovgon. She was held in captivity by the Russian soldiers. She survived sexual violence that her captors perpetrated against her, and she has worked to transfer her trauma from pain to personal growth and helping others. And she is the head of the NGO SEMA. And Ludmila Husseinova, head of Mumo Sisters. Ludmila is an active member of SEMA as well. She was helping the Ukrainian military who were trying to defend Mariupol when she was kidnapped and imprisoned by Russian soldiers who tortured and sexually assaulted her. And it was a New York Times journalist who was instrumental in her freedom. She is also a member of the pilot program on the interim reparation for survivors. So now we'll have a chance to talk to them, but it's your chance. Maybe I'll start, and then I'm going to turn it over to all of you. And first of all, congratulations, Alyssa, and to all of you for your extraordinary courage and for what you're doing now to make a difference for so many others. What do you want this film to do? And what can we do, whether as individuals or as a collective, as a group, to support you?
Actually, I didn't want to make this film for many years. Because I survived sexual violence myself in captivity in 2014. It took me almost 2 years to speak out. And after Irina Dovgon invited me to SEMA Ukraine, it was the first meeting. We were just 15 women with different background, different age, and we just started this movement from total silence. But from the very beginning of our meeting, we started to talk about documentary film as a tool to save memory, but also as a tool to fight for justice and to amplify voices of survivors. But I didn't find courage inside myself to start working on this film. And after 4 years later, full-scale war started, and we saw just massive scale of violence, horrible stories. And after we had the opportunity to receive a small grant for documenting crimes against humanity, and it was a decision made by 5 survivors, board members of SEMA Ukraine, including me and Irina and 3 other women. It was a collective decision from inside survivors, organization, survivors, community, and all of them promised me that they will support me. So this film wouldn't be even possible to make without this sisterhood support. But I thought that I will find strength to deal with it. But After we went with Irina to Kherson region, and one day we listened 5 stories, horrible stories, I had a feeling that it was just a hole inside myself. Just it's all this pain. I didn't know how to proceed with this pain. And I had to listen also again and again, testimonies, many hours again and again, and I started to have nightmares with a mosaic of all horrible elements of all the stories of other survivors, and I thought I would die. And there's only one thing which gave me, I don't know, belief that I would survive, that I have this mission, and that I just have to sacrifice something and to make this film possible, to make these voices to be heard. And only at the end of this journey I realized for what it was all made for. Because when I also with my own eyes observed the healing process of all these women, it healed me. And all my wounds which were opened at the beginning, they were healed. And more than this, when we showed this film, the Berlinale, it was a big cinema with 800 people. After the light was turned on, and all people were standing, standing ovations, and people were crying, and we saw the faces of these people. They were all in tears, but also they were full of empathy, which is not empathy to feel pity about us, but was active empathy. And this is the answer for me why I made this film. This empathy is a call for action, and it's a call to join us, to stand with us in this fight for justice. So really hope that this film is just another instrument that we can use to fight for justice, to make our voices louder, and to invite people to join us in this fight in solidarity.
You'll translate for Irina or Ludmila? Oh, okay, wonderful. Irina, the last time we were together, you were talking about what we can do to help SEMA or help the other organizations. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what we can do to help the survivors?
Я просто вдячна за те, що ви поруч.
I'm simply thankful for you being near us.
І за те, що всі люди, які тут в залі, вони також поруч з нами.
And to all those people who are here in this room for being with us.
Знаєте, на фестивалі, на сцені нас запитували.
At the festival we were on the stage and they were asking us.
Що ви хочете? Як вам допомогти? І найстарша жінка, яку ви бачили зараз на екрані, яка пережила насильство 75 років, це херсонська вчителька, вона сказала, допомагайте моїй Україні, допомагайте нам зброєю.
They were asking, so how can we help you? And this woman that you saw on the screen, she's 75 years old. She was a school teacher from Kherson, and she said, help us with weapons, help us to fight.
Я бачу тут в залі багатьох людей, як зі своєї держави, так і міжнародні організації, які вже давно поруч з нами.
I see many people here, some represent the government of Ukraine and some represent international organizations who've been with us for a long time now.
І ми пройшли цей шлях, який ми пройшли, мабуть, зовсім інакше, якщо б не було всієї цієї підтримки.
The journey that we have made, it probably would not have happened the way it did without all this support.
І, мабуть, найголовніше, це те, щоб вона не зупинялась, ця підтримка. Тому що попереду ще дуже багато роботи.
And it's very important. The most important is that this help should not stop because there's so much to do ahead of us.
І ви вмієте мобілізовувати ці сили навкруги нашої проблеми, трагедії нашого народу.
You know how to mobilize forces.
Залишайтесь сильними і залишайтесь з нами поруч.
Support, forces for support around this tragedy, big tragedy of our nation. So please stay strong and stay with us.
So, Ludmila, what would you like to say to us, building on what Irina said?
Я також хочу подякувати всім і Аліса тобі, тому що це важливо, це потужно, це сильно. І те, що ти зробила, ми говорили сьогодні всі про те, що необхідність історичної пам'яті.
I would like to thank all of you and special thanks to Elisa for what she's done. We all talked today about how important it is to record the memory, save the memory.
Я хочу подякувати всім вам, тому що 3 роки я вас знаю, ви знаєте мене. І в цих стінах кожного року ми робили виставки портретів тих дівчат, котрі залишаються в полоні.
I want to thank all of you. You know that in this building, in these rooms, we were making exhibitions of portraits each year of those girls, women who are still in captivity.
І це ваш вклад в створення історичної пам'яті.
And that too is your contribution to creating this historical memory.
І в цьому році ці портрети просто зараз знаходяться в Єльському університеті, і студенти, і професора, вони самі попросили залишити для того, щоб вони там будуть робити цю виставку і привертати увагу до тих жінок, котрі досі в полоні.
And at this time, those portraits are exhibited at Yale University because they asked to keep them there, and they attract more public attention, awareness to this theme.
І ви знаєте, мені дуже болить, тому що портретів стає більше.
I feel pain from seeing that there are more and more of these portraits.
І мені дуже болить, тому що щотижня ми отримуємо інформацію з тимчасово окупованих територій про нових затриманих жінок, дівчат, дітей.
Every new week we receive new information about more women and girls that were detained in the occupied territories.
Це люди, за котрих ми боремося і котрих чекаємо, і котрим буде потрібна наша допомога, ваша допомога. І ті закони, котрі зараз створюються, ті підзаконні акти, котрі ми зараз маємо впроваджувати, це для них також.
They are the ones that we are waiting to see back with us one day, and they are the ones who need all this work, the development of new laws and regulations to support them.
Але у мене є для вас і хороша новина. І ті жінки, портрети, чиї портрети були в цих стінах, за котрих ми разом з вами боролися на акціях, говорили, пам'ятали, знали про них, вони звільнені. І їх небагато, але вони передали ось ці портрети, котрі висіли в цих стінах, з особистими підписами.
This is the good news I have for you. Some of those portraits that used to be on your walls those individuals have been freed, and they sent these posters with their signatures to you.
Ці надписи – це подяка всім вам.
Those are words of thank you to all of you.
І я хочу, щоб ці портрети залишалися в стінах цього інституту, бо це історія України, котру робили ці дівчата, виживаючи в тих страшних полонах 6 років.
And I want these prints with their portraits to be kept at this institute because that's a living history of Ukraine, of those girls who were in captivity for 6 long years.
Це та історія, яку разом з вами ми створювали, коли боролися за них, коли говорили про них, коли пам'ятали про них.
This is the history that you and we were making together when we were talking about them, speaking, fighting for them.
Дякую вам.
Thank you.
So we have time to take a couple of questions. Maybe we'll take two together. Who has a question? Anybody? I think maybe we're too emotionally drained at this point.
Hi everyone, my name is Maria. I'm from the World Federation of Ukrainians Women's Organization. We're so much grateful, thankful, and very happy to see you here. Very happy to see that you continue doing this work, because not like you, who is going to do this, right? You were the first one, you were the pioneers, so I really hope that you'll continue to grow. And that is going to echo the question that what is your biggest daily challenge when you do this work, because you want to grow, and what is the largest systemic challenge? Like, that's the echo question, what also we can do to help you to overcome this. Thank you.
Okay, we can take one more if there's another one. Please.
My question is, what can youth who are of Ukrainian descent in the U.S. and other countries, or just youth who support Ukraine and support all of you, what can we do when we're not in Ukraine and not with you to support you and the work you do in Ukraine?
Okay, thank you. Alyssa, do you want to start?
This first question. Actually, what gives power? It's always people, and it's beauty and dignity inside people. Actually, the full-length film, for me, when I was finishing it, I felt that this film, much more than a film about war crimes, it's a film about triumph of dignity over evil. And for me, it's everyday fight. Fights between like darkness and light. And you have to find this like drops of light inside people you love. Sometimes you can buy bread and like a seller can smile to you after a very heavy night in Kiev, after bombings. And with this smile you can understand everything. And it is about our like solidarity and empathy to each other. And it's about our common light, which we can use against darkness. I will give one example. After I was fighting on the front line, and I had a son who was 5 years old, and I was writing him letters when I was under bombings, like Kiev region and Kharkiv region. And what I wanted to save in these letters, it was love and light. I wanted him that even if I would die, that he will remember me with love and light in his heart. And after I started to edit my previous documentary about my unit and about my time being on the front line, a lot of my friends, brothers in arms already died. And it was very hard to edit this film, seeing their faces smiling. And at some moment I realized that I'm not making film about pain and darkness. I'm making film about this memory, and this memory should consist light, because only with light we will have long-term power to fight in this war and to fight against evil. Yeah, so it's a light and love.
Я хочу трошки додати про труднощі, які ми зустрічаємо на шляху.
I would like to add a few words about the difficulties and challenges we face.
Нам зрозуміло, що жінок, переживших сексуальне насильство під час окупації, особливо на Херсонщині, де окупація тривала більше 10 місяців, і вони просто творили там терор.
We understand that with women who suffer through sexual violence, especially in Kherson region where the occupation lasted more than 10 months and the occupants were terrorizing the people.
Ми знаємо жінок, які пережили насильство і які досі не хочуть про це говорити.
And we know women who lived, who experienced such violence and still refuse to speak about it.
І причин дуже багато.
For many different reasons.
Перше, те, що вони продовжують жити дуже близько до лінії зіткнення.
Number one is they continue to live very close to the contact line.
І знаєте, це простий людський страх, що ворог за одну ніч буде знову тут.
And it may be simple human fear that the enemy may all of a sudden come back.
І це, мабуть, найбільше, що стримує цих жінок. Частково так, ми всі розуміємо, що в сільських громадах існує досі стигма.
This could be the biggest constraint for those women. But then, of course, we know that in rural communities there's still a stigma.
І нерозуміння того, що те, що скоїв ворог, це є воєнний злочин.
And the lack of understanding that what the enemy did is a war crime.
Що він не просто порозважався, а це він скоїв воєнний злочин.
They were not just entertaining themselves, they committed war crimes.
І ми активно працюємо над тим, щоб доносити це людям разом з державою, з громадськими організаціями, тому що, як приклад, чоловічі об'єднання.
We are making efforts to convey this message to the people together with government activists, government officials. As an example, the Association of Men.
Дуже багато чоловіків пройшли катування через сексуальне насильство.
There are lots of men who have experienced torture and sexual violence.
Але заговорили вони тільки тоді, коли вони зрозуміли, що це було не просто катування.
And they only started speaking about it when they realized that this wasn't simply torture.
Що це було саме сексуальне насильство, пов'язане з війною.
That this was sexual violence related to war and conflict.
І ми зараз маємо дуже багато чоловіків, які також порушили тишу.
Now we have many men who have broken this silence.
І вони також потребують допомоги.
They too need help.
Тому що вони тільки на початку свого шляху.
Because they are only at the beginning of this journey.
І не так багато в світі досвіду, що робити з чоловіками, пережившими сексуальне насильство.
There isn't so much experience around the world about what to do for men who live through sexual violence.
І вони дуже сильно потребують підтримки.
And they need support, help very much.
Які труднощі? Які труднощі ви запитали?
You asked about challenges.
Нам дуже страшно говорити про ці труднощі, котрі з'являються з поверненням кожної жінки з полону, де вона перебувала роками.
We fear to talk about the challenges we face when every new woman comes back from captivity where she had been kept for years.
І ми бачимо, які наслідки це залишили не тільки для жінки, яка пережила тортури в полоні, СНПК в полоні, а які страшні наслідки для її дітей.
We see terrible consequences not only for those women who stayed in captivity, but also consequences for their children.
Це те, що мало ще ми вивчаємо, те, про що ми мало ще знаємо, родинна травма.
The family trauma, what we still don't know much about, and we are still studying that, learning it.
Світлана, котру ви бачите, вона 6 років не бачила своїх дітей, і ви її історію знаєте.
You know the story of this woman, Svetlana, who she had not seen her children for 6 years.
І в тому році вона повернулася з полону під час обміну, і ми організували миттєву зустріч з її доньками. І перші 2 години це було щастя, обійми, сльози, радощі. Але через 2 години ми були вимушені шукати терміново психолога дитячого і психолога для мами.
So last year, when she finally was returned through a prisoner swap, we quickly organized a meeting for her and family members, children, others. And the first 2 hours, this was a very happy reunion. But 2 hours later, we had to urgently seek for a psychologist for the children and for the mother.
Ми бачимо і розуміємо, що над цим нам працювати роками.
We see this and we understand, we are aware that this is something for us to work on for years ahead.
Так як працювати роками з дівчинкою Юлією Власовою, котра чекає 7 років, 7 років дитина чекає маму.
Like as well as working with that girl Yulia Vlasova who has been waiting for her mom to return for 7 years now.
Ця дитина сьогодні потребує нашої підтримки, допомоги, психологічної.
This child needs our support today, continuous support, psychological help.
Але ми не можемо замінити маму. Маму засудили в Росії на 18 років.
But we cannot replace her mom for her, and the mom was sentenced to 18 years of imprisonment in Russia.
І це проблема, я не знаю, як її вирішити.
And this is a problem I don't know how to resolve it.
Ви запитали, що ви можете зробити, знаходячись тут.
And you asked what you can do while you're here.
Дуже багато.
A lot of things.
Пам'ятати і знати, що наші українці на тимчасово окупованих територіях щотижня їх арештовують, катують, над ними знущаються, над жінками, над чоловіками, над дітьми лише через те, що вони є українцями.
You need to know this and to remember that every day our men and women are tortured, abused, arrested, detained in occupied territories just for being Ukrainians.
Допомагайте нам в нашому прагненні до справедливості.
And please support our desire for justice.
Підтримайте наше звернення до Генерального секретаря щодо включення Росії в шейм-лист.
Support our appeal to the UN Secretary General about putting Russia on the shame list.
Ці воєнні злочинці мають бути покарані.
Those war criminals must be
І
punished.
світ має знати, що Росія чинить страшні, нелюдські воєнні злочини на тимчасово окупованих
And the
територіях
world
України.
must know that Russia is doing, committing inhuman crimes in the occupied territories of Ukraine. Thank you.
So there is much for us all to continue to do. Let's just thank these extraordinary women. I don't know how you've done what you've done. And now to close our program, I'm going to ask Emily Moltmann, the Deputy Director of the Gender and Children in Conflict Department at the United Kingdom's Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, to give us some closing words.
Thank you. Good evening, Excellencies, colleagues, friends. Thank you, Jakio. It's an honour to give the closing remarks tonight on behalf of the UK government. We've all listened, and I think we're probably all feeling quite a lot of things. I want you to just trust me for a moment and put your hands on your tummy, close your eyes, and just breathe. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. Thank you for trusting me. This is difficult. We all heard tonight about the reality of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. And we also heard the powerful voices of those that have survived. But they are not powerless, and they are not alone. We are all here. And on behalf of the UK government, we stand with Ukraine. The UK government created the Preventing Sexual Violence in Conflict initiative in 2012, and we never imagined it would be relevant to Ukraine, but here we are. The UK government's programme tries to prevent sexual violence in conflict, but also respond and use the best tools and the best practice that Ukraine has worked on last year to give the best response, and also to put survivors first. So what can we all do? That's one of the reflections that's come through the questions. We should remain survivor-centred. We should support survivor leadership and co-creation. We should recognise what is happening in conflicts everywhere, in every conflict around the world. And let's help reduce stigma. For Ukraine specifically, let's recognise what has been happening since 2014. Excuse me. This did not start in 2022, but in 2014. And let's listen to the call to put Russia on the UN's shame list. I'll read to you what that means. The UN's list lists perpetrators, actors, usually armed forces, but can also include armed groups, that are credibly suspected of committing or being responsible for patterns of rape or other forms of sexual violence in situations of armed conflict. The UK supports Russia being put on that list this year. So what can we do? Let's recognise what has happened, what is happening. Let's listen, let's see, and let's act. Let's stand with the survivors, stand with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
Well, thank you. I'm back and I'm humbled to have the last word here after such amazing participants. I'm very emotional because I was just handed for the Institute these signed posters. And what I think, come show. I love what one of our panelists said. Let's spread our message not with darkness, but with love and light. And let's keep working together. I invite you across the hall to join us for a glass of wine and a snack, to continue sharing, to get our energy up so that we can keep doing this work together. Thank you all for being here.